Boy, that's a very high bar. That's a very high bar you placed for me. Maybe it's time for me to retire quietly and say it loud. Hello, everybody. Actually, Shahruz, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before a group like this, because I can just feel that the energy is just super. So thank you all for deciding that you're going to give me a couple of hours of your precious Saturday morning. Let me tell you a little bit about how I came to be doing what I presently do. I grew up in India, and I was a good student, and I got a pretty high score on my GMAT, and that meant that I could come to America on a scholarship. I had no interest in doing a PhD, but I had a huge interest in coming to America. And if you want to come to America, it's an excellent idea to come on somebody else's nickel if you can manage it. So here are all these universities saying, "Dear Mr. Rao, come do PhD, we will give you fellowship." That means money. So I said, "Yes, sir, I'll do PhD." So I came to Columbia because it was in New York. I decided to do my PhD in marketing because at that time, Columbia was the world's best school in marketing. So that's how my life was going, drifting. I was lucky. I got a break. After I did my PhD, I got a job with Warner Communications. And I got a lucky break because Warner Brothers, which is the motion picture subsidiary of Warner Communications, had come up with a blockbuster film. And they needed to come up with an advertising strategy for that film. Now, the advertising agency came up with 7 different options, and we had to decide which one to run. This was too big a project to have been given to me normally, because I had been only with the company a few weeks. But my boss had a personal emergency, and his boss had to go to Europe on a long scheduled trip, so I got to do the project. I surveyed thousands of motion picture goers in 4 major markets. On the basis of the research, I made a recommendation, and the company accepted the recommendation. It was one of the few recommendations I made that was actually accepted, and the movie went on to become an all-time blockbuster. In fact, even today, after 50 years, it's on the list of 50 top-grossing movies of all time. That movie was The Exorcist, the original Exorcist. How many of you have seen the original Exorcist? Okay. So you'll understand that this is very remarkable for the following reason. If you look at the list of 50 top-grossing movies of all time, The Exorcist is the only horror film in that list. All the others are what we call general interest movies. Gone with the Wind, Forrest Gump, Indiana Jones, movies like that. The Exorcist is the only horror movie there. And the reason that's remarkable is because at that time, the movie-going audience was pretty much split evenly between, it's a horror film, I'm going to go see it, and it's a horror film, there's no way I'm going to see it. So you didn't have to do much for the group that wanted to see a horror film, because the book was itself a blockbuster, so they'd go see it. But the second group we had to get it in, and the advertising theme I selected didn't reveal it as a horror movie. He said maybe it's a thriller, a suspense film, a drama. And by the time they got in and recognized it wasn't a horror film, it was the mother of all horror films, we already had their money, so it was fine. So it worked wonders for me personally, and at the ripe age of 22, I was head of corporate research for Warner Communications, reporting directly to the president. So my career took off like a rocket. But I got burnt out by corporate politics, so I thought, I have a PhD, let me go to universities where everybody is imbued with the quest for pure knowledge and politics does not exist. Yeah, I discovered that too. Politics is alive and well in academia. I think it was Kissinger who said the reason the knives are so sharp is because the stakes are so low. He got it right. So then I moved along and I stagnated. And I was feeling very sorry for myself because my colleagues who remained in the corporate arena went on to great financial success and hierarchical accomplishment. And I was stuck as a university professor. And in the meantime, I got married and had children, and there were financial and other pressures. And I was feeling sorry for having had great education, which I threw away. And I felt I'd ruined my life. It's over. Now, all my life, I'd been doing a lot of reading, spiritual biography, mystical autobiography. They take me to a wonderful place, and then I came back to the real world, and it sucked. And I remember thinking, if all of this is useful only if you're sitting quietly thinking peaceful thoughts, but not when you came to the hurly-burly, then it's useless. But somehow I knew that wasn't true. I knew that this was very valuable, maybe even the only thing that was very valuable. I just hadn't figured out how to make use of it. So one day I got a bright idea, which is, why don't I take the teachings of the world's greatest masters, strip them of religious, cultural, and other connotations, and adapt them so that they're acceptable to intelligent people in a post-industrial society. And the thought of doing that made me come alive. Until then, I was a marketing guy, so anytime I got a bright idea, my immediate question was, will others be interested? Is there a market for it? And if I thought there was, I'd develop it. If I thought there wasn't, I'd drop it. This was the first time I did not ask the question. I was going to develop the course because I needed it for me. And my initial thought was, I teach MBAs. We all know what motivates MBAs. Nobody is going to enroll in my course. And that was fine. If they did, God bless them. If they didn't, God bless them anyway. But I was going to create that course because I needed it for me. So I did. It did well. I moved it to Columbia Business School in 1999, and it exploded. It was the only course at Columbia, which is the university-wide draw. I had students from law school, business school, School of International and Public Affairs, journalism, all over the place. And then Columbia is a major international business school, so students came from other schools on exchange programs, and they took my course and went back and said, oh, this is a great course, you got to have it. So I traveled. I've taught it at many top business schools, Columbia Business School, London Business School, Kellogg, Berkeley, Imperial College, and then I spun it out and taught it privately in New York, London, and San Francisco. Since the COVID, of course, it's been entirely virtual. And in the meantime, also, it got a tremendous amount of publicity because I stated in the syllabus, this course will profoundly change your life. Otherwise, we've both failed. It's a business school course, for heaven's sake. What do you mean it'll change my life? But remember the sources I told you I draw my material from. These are the world's greatest masters. They completely understood the human predicament and came up with solutions that have been tested over millennia, and they absolutely work. So given that, the surprising thing is not this changes life, but how could it not change your life? So I'm going to build on what Charu's told you. You know, if you listen to me carefully, if you implement even some of the strategies that I'm going to share with you, your life will change. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, you going to work with me? All right. That's how to be happy and successful. That's my company. Those are my books, and if you go to Amazon and order them, my publisher will be very happy. And let me ask you a question. Are you happy? You know, most people, I'm going to do something which I normally do not do, which is I don't ask people to think about, are you happy or not? Because if you ask yourself, are you happy, odds are you're not. Because the people who are happy are very busy being happy. They're doing work which they find meaningful, purposeful, and so on, and they don't even bother asking themselves, are you happy? But if you think about it, you look out and say, yep, yeah, I'm happy. But I'm now inviting you to go deeper. When you say you're happy, what you're really saying is, there is nothing which is really bothering me right now. I know that there's enough food to eat. I know that, my work gives me a decent income. I don't have any financial pressure. I'm in good health. I have a bed to sleep in. Things are generally fine. There's nothing really bothering me. So, yes, I'm happy. Is that right? That is an extraordinarily low bar. Now, think about it and work with me. I want you to think back to the very first time you fell in love. Let me repeat that. Go back and recreate in your head the very first time you fell in love. So what happened then? Can you remember that? You woke up in the morning and boy, life was good. You moved through the day and it seemed as if heavenly music was wafting from the wind. Everybody was, just an angel. Can you remember that feeling? There was joy exuding from you in such measure that you couldn't contain it. You thought you'd burst. Right? Why aren't you like that now? And of course, people say, that was the first flush of youth and love, and you can't have that all the time. That's a story you're telling yourself. That is the potential. And let me tell you about a person. He's written his story in a spiritual classic called The Way of the Pilgrim, which is a book I recommend for all of you, by the way. There are many translations. Pick whichever one you like. Nobody knows who the Pilgrim was. The Pilgrim was Russian. He roamed around Siberia in the late 19th century. The only thing he had was a torn woolen coat and a copy of the Philokalia and the Bible. And if you're roaming around Siberia in the winter and you only have a torn woolen coat, you're not in a very happy place, physically speaking. He had a dislocated shoulder and no doctor to see, so he lived with the pain. And that was his life. But somebody found his diary in the early 20th century, translated it, and published it, and it instantly became a classic. And if you read that, you will know that he was in a state of such exaltation that just reading it transports you. And he talked about such overwhelming joy he felt that he was not even walking, but he was kind of joyously floating through the air. There were angels everywhere appearing in human form, and he couldn't imagine anybody being happier than him. And sometimes the joy was so powerful that he felt as if he would burst. He could go down to his knees in involuntary gratitude to the tremendous good fortune that had been bestowed on him. That is spiritual ecstasy. That is true happiness. In India, we have a term for it. It's called Ananda. Ananda has been mistranslated into happiness, contentment, satisfaction, etc. But it's been mistranslated because there's no word in the English language which is equivalent. But Ananda is the feeling that I have just described to you, where everything is okay, and not everything is okay, but everything is riotously, fantastically okay, and you're bursting with well-being, and you have such joy inside you that you can't contain it. It's kind of coming out and overflowing in drabs. And you just hope it doesn't go so high that you'll burst, because that's the feeling you have. That's happiness. So when you say I'm happy and you're basically saying, there's nothing really bothering me, I want you to be aware that there is a much, much deeper possibility. And life is so short that you really shouldn't settle for anything less. Now, the thing about this happiness that I talked about, this ananda, this overwhelming joy, that's what I mean by saying, are you radiantly alive? The point is, this is not an aspirational goal. In other words, you can't go around and say, what this guy's saying seems cool. I'd like to get there. Now, what do I have to do to get there? It doesn't work that way. Actually, what I have to say will probably surprise you. So I'd like you simply to think about it. That state is yours already. You don't have to get there. You have to get rid of the obstacles that are preventing you from realizing that you are already there. It's not a process of I have to do something to get there. It's a process of I have to get rid of the stuff that I'm doing that prevent me from realizing that that is my true nature. Okay? Most people report that they have more stress in their life now than ever before. And I asked this question of thousands of persons on 6 continents, and it's pretty universal. Everybody feels that there's more stress in their life now than there has ever been. How many of you feel the same way? A lot of you, right? So, of course, when people tell me there's more stress in my life now than ever before, I ask them, why do you have stress in your life? And as you can imagine, I get lots of answers. I got dozens of answers. And I boiled them down to 8 major factors, which I'll share with you right now. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to play a little game. And I'd like all of you to stand up, please. And if you're drinking coffee or something, you'll have to put it down, so I apologize. Now, here's what we're going to do. Hundreds of people have told me this is the reason that I feel stressed, and I boiled them down to 8 factors. These are not mutually exclusive, so they kind of overlap, but I'm going to describe them to you. So as I describe each of these factors, what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate, is this a reason why I feel stress in my life? And if the answer to that is yes, sit down. And if the answer to that is no, keep standing. Fair enough? You all got that? I'm going to put down those factors and describe them to you. And you're going to evaluate your life. And you're going to decide, does this factor cause stress to me? And if the answer to that is yes, sit down. And if the answer to that is no, remain standing. Okay? All right, so just to see where we all are, would you just look around the auditorium and see where everybody is? Okay. So let's see what are the reasons people say they feel stress. Number 1 is financial. I don't have enough. I have bills to pay, I have mortgage payments to make. Somehow there just isn't enough money. Okay? And by the way, when you talk about financial, you're not necessarily just talking about your personal situation. You could also be talking about your business situation. I want to undertake a major expansion of my business, and the bank isn't giving me credit. For whatever reason, you feel that there are not enough zeros in your balance, and that is a cause for concern. So that's reason number one. Relationships, typically with partner or spouse, but could be with anyone, could be with in-laws, relationships, siblings, children, work colleagues. You want them to be harmonious, you want them to be generous, caring, but somehow or other, they're not where you'd like to be. Number three, children. Now, seriously, what are children? Children are bundles of joy sent to bring meaning and purpose to your life, right? And they are. But children do the darndest things, and they begin early. They poop right after you change them. And by the way, one of the things Shahruz forgot to mention is that I am a new grandfather, relatively new. I have 3 grandchildren, identical twin girls who are a year old and a grandson who's 3 years old. And I can tell you, yes, they do indeed poop right after you change them. And not only do they poop right after you change them, but when you're changing them for the second time, in the interim between you've taken off the old diaper but not put in the new one, they pee. They do the darndest thing. They grow up and fall in love with the most inappropriate people. They drop out of college. So children are bundles of joy, said to bring meaning to your life, but they can significantly add to the stress in your life. Business and career, given your talents, given your smarts, you expect it to be at a certain point in your life, and you're just not where you thought you would be. Health. You want to run the marathon. You want to run the marathon in 2 hours, which would be a really, really, really big deal. But your doctor tells you that he wants to see you again and there are more tests needed. What tests? Where? I guess you don't really have to say too much about health in pandemic times. But even apart from COVID, there's stuff like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia floating around, and many of you have parents, elderly relatives. And when we're talking about health, it's not necessarily just your own health, but also the health of others who are close to you. So that could be a serious cause for concern. Then there is the big external stuff, politics, crime, environment, you name it. How many of you feel there is too much to do and you don't have enough time to do it all? And last but not least, I'm not where I would like to be. Given my talents, given my abilities, I expect my life to unfold, and this is where I want to be, and I am not where I want to be. And there's this guy called Jeff Bezos who has more money than I do. So those are the reasons why people say they feel stress. And for those of you who are standing, can I tell you what causes stress in your life? What's your name? No, yeah, sure, you too, huh? But okay, and Beth, what causes stress in your life? That's not in the factors that I put up there.
Well, I'm standing because those things are not really, I'm neurodivergent, so.
Those things are what?
I'm neurodivergent, so I make peace with a lot of that stuff. My stress comes from the fact that the Western the Western setup of society is not always conducive to the way my brain thinks.
Western way of society is not always?
Not always conducive to the way my brain works and thinks. So I've had to tailor my life in order to find peace with those two things and be okay with where I'm at, even though I may not be considered
Yeah.
successful.
Actually, Beth, the last factor I put down is exactly what you're talking about. Let me explain. I had someone who told me, I feel a lot of stress. I do yoga. I've got a very robust meditation practice. And given that I have a robust meditation practice, I should not be feeling any kind of stress. But I am feeling a great deal of stress. In other words, she was feeling stressed out about the fact that she was feeling stressed out. And that is precisely what you're saying. The Western world, it doesn't conform to what I believe. And
What I believe.
no, of what you think or what you know.
It's, how I interact with the world is just different. So
Exactly correct. So you're not where you want to be. You want to be in a place where people interact your way.
put into a box, for sure.
Exactly. So that last factor essentially encompasses what you just articulated.
You're scaring the hell
I will go easier. All right. So, folks, look around. So what I'm going to be talking about is relevant to all of you. And I want to share with you a fundamental misunderstanding right there. Now, you think that there are one or more of the factors that I put on which cause stress to you in your life. And how many of you believe that you can get rid of the stress in your life? Poof, just like that, live a completely stress-free. Actually, you can live a completely stress-free life. And if you implement all of what I share with you, you will have no stress in your life, period. Poof, it'll go off just like that. But even if you implement one or two of the things I share with you, and you do it in a completely half-assed, half-hearted way, it will still considerably diminish the stress in your life. It will not eliminate it, but it will diminish it. But if you implement all of it, it will completely eliminate, it will eradicate stress in your life. Okay? That's a bold promise, right? So you're going to tell me afterwards if I have delivered on that. Number one, there is a fundamental misapprehension you have. There's only one reason you have stress in your life. And the only one reason you have stress in your life is you have a very rigid idea of this is the way the universe should be. And the universe is paying no attention whatsoever to what you want, and it's going its merry way. So you want to have a certain number of zeros in your bank account, the deposit side, and there are fewer zeros than you would like. You would like your career to be progressing. You want your boss to tell you what a great job you're doing and to promote you and give you more money. And he tells you that your performance is unsatisfactory and, perhaps you might be laid off. You want to travel and go on vacation, and the universe gives you COVID and lockdowns. You think the universe should unfold in a particular manner, and the universe is not paying any attention to what you want, and you resist it and you resent it, and in that resistance and resentment, you have stress in your life, and that is the only reason you have stress in your life. Now, this is such an important point that I'm going to pause here and ask you to think about it for a moment. You don't have stress in your life because, quote, I don't have enough money. You have stress in your life because you believe, you want, you desire a certain amount of money, and you don't have the amount that you need. And you resent it and resist it, and in that resentment and stress, in that resentment and resistance, you have stress in your life. And that's the only reason you have stress. Anybody, are you all in my boat? You've probably not thought about it that way, but I now invite you to think about it that way. You have stress in your life because you have a rigid idea. This is how the universe should be, and the universe is not playing ball with you. Now, you probably don't think of yourself in this way, but you are a control freak. You know, you probably think you're nice and easygoing and a good chap, but you're really not. You're a control freak. Your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to exert control over some part of your internal or external environment. This is super important. Pay attention. Your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to exert control over some part of your internal or external environment. Are you married? Why did you get married? Well, you got married because you saw this person and it made you feel good. And 10 seconds later or 10 minutes later, you saw the person again and you felt better and said, okay, you know, why don't we push it along? And if we hitch up, then we'll have great sex and companionship and love, and that seems like a good thing. So let's do it. And you got married. It was an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Are you dentists? Well, why did you become dentist? So, well, you know, there is this thing called life, and in life you have to earn money if you're going to do okay or well, and if I become a dentist, then I'll have an assured source of income and a reasonably decent one, and I'll also be doing some good to my fellow people. It seems good, so let's do it. It was an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Do you have children? Why do you have children? I said, well, you know, if we have children, then there'll be love and joy and meaning, and, you know, let's do it. It was an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Everything, but everything you do is an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. You're all control freaks. And it even goes to the little things. You know, if I scratch my nose, it's because I hope the itch will go away. It's an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. I will grant you that you probably don't think of your life in that way, but I'm now inviting you to think of it that way. Everything you do is an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Already? Right? You're on my boat? I have some good news for you. You do not have control. You never had control. You never will have control. Control is a myth. Control is an illusion. The only thing you have is the illusion of control. And this, by the way, is a very important thing for you to know. You think you have control, you're going to go do X, Y, Z, and you'll get the results you want. Why do you have the illusion of control? You have the illusion of control because many times in your life you were at a particular position A, you wanted to go to position B, and you thought, if I do A, B, and C, I'll get from here to there, where I want to go. And you did, and you got there. And this has happened many times in your life. It's happened many times in the lives of those around you. So you look at that and say, see, I have control, I did it. In reality, any of the countless things that could have derailed you did not happen, so be grateful, be immensely grateful. But only imagine for an instant that you have control. How many of you can recall something that happened in your life that was so completely unexpected that it threw all your plans for a loop? Can you recall any such instance? See, a lot of nodding heads. It happened to you. It happened to you before. It will happen to you again. The only thing that you don't know is when it'll happen and how it will happen. In that sense, the pandemic is a great teacher. You know, I'm a tennis fanatic. My wife is an even bigger tennis fanatic. We go to the US Open practically every year. We've been to the French Open numerous times. 3 years ago, we went to the Australian Open. Last year was the year that we were supposed to go to Wimbledon. Not last year, the year before. So we bought tickets. And at that time, if somebody had told me, Srikumar, you're not going to see Wimbledon, and I said, yeah. But in my head would have been something like perhaps somebody close to me fell ill, as a result of which we couldn't make the trip. I would never have imagined that we wouldn't go to Wimbledon because the tournament itself was canceled. And in any case, there were no planes flying between New York and London. The pandemic brought home to you at a visceral level that you do not have control. And even if you were accepting, I don't have control, you were thinking about it at a superficial level. My marriage is kind of rocky, I don't know if it'll survive, I don't have control. My kid has applied to Harvard, I don't know if he'll get in, I don't have control. But even when you're saying things like that, you're embedded in a worldview where things are predictable. That if you don't have toilet paper in the house, you go to the supermarket and buy a roll. If there's no food, you can go to a restaurant and order from the menu. And when the pandemic hit, even those things were called into a question. So you knew at a very visceral level, you don't have control. So I'm inviting you to think about that. You go through life in the bubble and think, yes, this is going to happen, I have control, and you don't. And I get tremendous pushback when I say that. Professor Rao, you're going too full. Maybe I don't have full control, but I have partial control. Or maybe I don't have control, but I have influence. That's like saying she's a little bit pregnant. You don't have control. If it makes you better to think you have partial control, by all means. But the only thing you have is the illusion of control. And mind you, the illusion of control is a fantastic thing. I am not knocking it. It's wonderful that you have the illusion of control. Because the illusion of control is what has made you as successful as you are. That is what makes you get up in the morning, make plans, execute on the plans. It's wonderful. That's what's got you to the level of success you have. It's the illusion of control that makes you say, I'm going to go off to dental school and I'm going to get my degree and I'm going to come back and work in this beautiful place in the Yazdani dental clinics, which by that time will have expanded from 3 to 275 locations. The illusion of control is what makes you get up in the morning and make plans. That's wonderful. Don't knock it. But use the illusion of control, knowing that it is the illusion of control, and at some point it is going to break down. And when you use the illusion of control, knowing that it is the illusion of control, when it breaks down, you simply say, this is the time it broke down, what do I do here? But if you use the illusion of control without knowing that it is the illusion of control, that's when you go to pieces. Oh my God, this happened. This is the end of the world. So use the illusion of control. It's a very useful tool, but use it knowing that it is the illusion of control. So, given the fact that you don't have control, you never had control, you never will have control, how can you live a life of great meaning and purpose? And more important, how can you tap in to that joy that I was talking about earlier? Well, in order to explain that, I have to share a number of concepts with you. And one extremely important concept is called mental chatter. And mental chatter is an internal monologue that you have going on in your heads all the time. You've always had it. It begins right when you get up in the morning, is with you throughout the day, is with you right now, when out of politeness you ought to be listening to my chatter instead of your chatter. But how many of you in the time that I've been speaking have already gone someplace else? Oh my God, what do I have to do? I've got to return this phone call. I rest my case. That's mental chatter. You've always had it. It's a part of your life. It's like an unwelcome relative who's shown up and you can't kick him out. So what do? You live your life as best you can despite your mental chatter. Suppress it, ignore it, work around it, but you go on with your life despite your mental chatter. Huge mistake. And the reason it's a huge mistake is because you construct your life with your mental chatter. You do not live in a real world. You think you live in a real world, but you don't. You live in a construct. Every single one of you is living in the matrix. How many of you have seen the matrix, the original matrix? All of you are living in the matrix. Only this is not a matrix constructed by an alien civilization out to enslave you. It's a matrix that you constructed with your mental chatter and your mental models, and I'll get to that in a second. And having constructed it, you then experience your life as you have constructed it. One of the more important teachings of the Buddha is the parable of the second arrow. So the Buddha asked Ananda, his student, Ananda, if an arrow were to hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? And Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be very painful. And then the Buddha asked, if a second arrow were to hit you exactly where the first arrow hit you, would it not be even more painful? And Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha asked a surprising question, why then do you shoot the second arrow? Now, I notice that you're looking puzzled, so let me explain further, and I'll explain by means of a story. There was this woman, and she was a good mother, and her son grew up and turned 16, and he got his provisional driver's license. And one day he comes up to his mother and says, hey, Ma, I'm getting together with a bunch of my friends, and I need to take the car. And she says, of course not. You just turned 16, you only got a provisional license, you can't take the car. Where do you have to go? I'll drop you. No, mother, you don't understand. I have to take the car. She says, okay, you need a car, it's fine, I'll drive you there. No, you don't understand. I have to take the car, and you have to not be there. This is, no. And he said, no, mother, you don't understand. It's really important. I'm getting together with my friends, and, they've got to know that I can drive, and I need the car, and you can't be there. And the mother says, no. But you know how kids are. He begged, he pleaded, he wheedled, and bit by bit, the mother felt herself giving way. And she took promises. You'll call. Yes, I'll call. No liquor. No drinking. And you'll come back by 10 o'clock. Yes, I'll come back by 10 o'clock. And finally, reluctantly, she gives him the car keys. And of course, once he got the car keys, he forgets all about his promises. He doesn't call. He has too many beers. He meets curfew. On the way back, he has a serious accident, and his mother is in the hospital when he's being operated on. And when he's wheeled into the recovery room, she rushes home to have a quick shower so she can go back to the hospital. And at that time, her friend calls. And her friend says, "What kind of a mother are you? How could you possibly have let him take the car? You're not a mother, you're a murderer." Are you shocked that a friend would call and say something like that at this juncture? Probably. Would you be less shocked if I said it wasn't what a friend said, it's what she told herself? That is the second arrow. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. In fact, for most of my coaching clients, if they could stop at the second arrow, they'd be way ahead of the game. Before they realize what they're doing, they're on their 25th, 38th, or 286th arrows. The second arrow is always delivered by mental chatter. And I invite you to do an experiment right now. No matter what situation is concerning you, your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. Can you recognize that? All of you? No matter what situation is concerning you, your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. Mental models. A mental model is a notion you have that this is the way the world works, and you have dozens of models, hundreds of models. You got a model for everything, a model for how do I find a person to marry? How do I build my marriage with the person I married? How do I bring up my children? How do I get a job? How do I get ahead in the job that I have? You've got dozens of models. Some of these models may be in conflict with each other, and you may or may not be aware of the conflict. The problem is not that you have mental models. The problem is that you're not aware that you have mental models. You think that this is the way the world works. This is not the way the world works. This is your model of the way the world works. And the more you believe in your model, the more it seems to you that the world is exactly the way you think it is. And very soon you build a silo around yourself that's so thick, you find it difficult to break out of. Now, all of this seems pretty abstract. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I don't want you to listen to me telling you the story. I want you to put yourself in the situation that I'm outlining to you. And Salam, may I pick on you? You don't have a choice, since I know you might name this, I'm going to pick on you anyway. So here's the deal, Salam. Okay. You are going to an important meeting. Got that? A really important meeting. You are driving. You are running late. You are stuck in a massive traffic jam. Not a run-of-the-mill traffic jam, but a really massive traffic jam. And it's a beastly cold day, and the heater in your car has stopped functioning. Got all of that now? You're going to an important, and all of you, please, put yourself in that situation, because you're going to help Salah, or try to help Salah later on. So you're going to a really important meeting, you're driving, you're running late, you're stuck in a massive traffic jam, beastly cold day, and your car heater isn't working. Okay? And all of a sudden, somebody cuts in front of you and almost causes an accident. What are your feelings towards the driver of that car? All right, let me change it. Would you agree that under the circumstances that I have just outlined, the feeling of all of these good people, if they were in that situation, towards the driver of the car that almost cut you off and caused an accident, are not those of loving kindness? You'll agree with that? All right. So now let me share some information with you. The driver of that car who cut you off and almost caused an accident had received some disquieting news. His son had been involved in a serious accident and has to be operated on immediately, and is desperately trying to get to the hospital with no knowledge of whether or not he'll ever see his son alive again. So what happens when I share that information with you? Can you feel your frustration, anger, rage drain out to be replaced with compassion for a fellow human being in an unfortunate predicament? Yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding. You can imagine that. But, Sarah, you don't really know whether the guy who cut you off was a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk, right? So what are you going to do? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to hire a private investigator to look into the matter and report back to you. And if the private investigator reports back to you that the guy was an inconsiderate jerk, you'll be really pissed off. But if the private investigator reports back to you that the guy was a distraught father, you'll feel great compassion. But until you know for sure, you're going to remain neutral. Is that what you're going to do? Doubtful. Would you agree that under the circumstances I've outlined, none of the good people in this room would hire a private investigator to look into the matter? But if none of the good people in this room is going to hire a private investigator to look into the matter and report back, none of them are ever really going to know whether the guy who cut them off was a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk, correct? The more important point is really doesn't matter. You have the choice of determining the emotional domain in which you will live. Let me repeat that. You have the choice of determining what is the emotional domain that you will live in. Most likely, all of this happens so fast in a flash that you never think about it the way I've just outlined it. But now that I've slowed it down and peeled back the layers, can you see that you had a choice and you made a decision? Everybody, can you see that you had a choice and you made a decision? The reason you made the choice that you did and the decision that you did is because of the mental chatter that you entertain and the mental models that you hold. And the reason this is so important is because you face such a juncture in your life dozens of times every day. Let me repeat that. You face such a juncture in your life dozens of times every day. And in many of those instances, perhaps a majority of those instances, you choose to occupy an emotional domain where you feel angry, anxious, nervous, fearful, stressed out, and you never recognize that this was a choice you had and a decision you made. Happens multiple times every day. Your awareness is like a flashlight. What does a flashlight do? A flashlight, illuminates whatever you shine it on, correct? Shine it on the floor, lights up the floor. Shine it on the ceiling, illuminates the ceiling. Whatever you shine it on, the flashlight lights up. Your awareness is like a flashlight. I'm going to prove it to you right now. I want you to take the awareness, your flashlight of awareness, and shine it on the chair in which you are sitting. Everybody, take your flashlight of awareness and shine it on the chair that you're sitting. Now, the moment you shine it on the chair in which you're sitting, do you become aware of the pressure of your buttocks on the seat of the chair? Can you feel the fabric against the back of your thigh? Yes, no? 30 seconds ago, you were not aware of any of that, but now you are. Why? Because you shone the flashlight of your awareness on that. What do you typically do with your flashlight of awareness? You shine it on the 2, 3, or 4 things that are wrong in your life. More precisely, you shine it on the 2, 3, or 4 things that you think are wrong in your life. Right? Now, every single one of you in this room is incredibly privileged. Do you understand that? Do any of you have to bother about whether you're going to have dinner tonight and tomorrow? Do you have a bed to sleep in, a roof over your head? Can you go from place A to place B with reasonable certainty that you're not going to get blown up? I see a number of nodding heads. So when I point all of that out, yeah, you say yes. You agree. So you are incredibly privileged. But you don't feel incredibly privileged. You feel put upon and stressed out. Why is that? It's because of where you shine the flashlight of your awareness on. And you're constantly shining onto the 2, 3, or 4 things that you think are wrong in your life. Not the 2 or 3 or 4 things that are wrong in your life, but the 2, 3, or 4 things that you think are wrong in your life. And the 40, 50, 200 things which are pretty damn good about your life, you never shine the flashlight of your awareness on them, so they pass by unnoticed. Terrible, terrible strategy. Start shining the flashlight of your awareness on the many ways in which you are truly blessed. I would advocate doing it last thing at night before you go to bed. When you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the space of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. Shine the flashlight of your awareness on the many ways in which you are fortunate. And as you go through the day, constantly bring up this feeling and shine the flashlight of your awareness on the many things which are good in your life. It is my hope that you will live in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, because guess what? When you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you're not angry, you're not nervous, you're not fearful, you're not insecure. The two cannot coexist. Appreciation and gratitude is a big thing these days. Everybody's talking about, oh, you've got to feel grateful. And appreciation and gratitude is a very important part of my coaching practice, very important in the program that I run called Creativity and Personal Mastery. And a lot of people say, Professor Rao, it's very nice, I do need to be grateful, but darn it, it's not working for me. They all say this has this great benefits, but I'm not feeling it. And the reason for that is we're all type A creatures who live in our brains. And there is too much a tendency of us to think appreciation and gratitude rather than feel appreciation and gratitude. And you can't go, good health, check, food to eat, check, roof overhead, check. It doesn't work that way. It's not a thinking exercise. You have to experience the feeling of being grateful. So how do you go from thinking gratitude to feeling gratitude? That happens by constantly looking at the things that you're grateful for, seeing how they interrelate with each other, and telling yourself a story about that. So you have food to eat, and because you have food to eat, you're not constantly thinking about where is my next meal coming from. You have a bed to sleep in and a roof over your head, so you can have a restful slumber. So because you have food to eat, you're not going to bed thinking, where's my next meal coming from? And because you have a bed to sleep in, a roof over your head, you have a comfortable night's sleep. And because you have that, you have the ability when one of your clients calls and the client has a problem, you can devote all your attention and your mental energy to helping solve that client's problem. And that client is satisfied, so he'll pay you and he'll refer friends to you, and you make a living. And all of that is possible because you're not bothered about where's my next meal coming from. So as you tell stories to yourself about the things that are good in your life and you start reflecting upon it, you will find that gradually there is a skein of gratefulness that will emerge, and gradually the thinking will morph into feeling. You have to work at this. But if you put in some dedicated effort, it does not take a whole lot of time for the thinking to become the feeling. And that's when you'll recognize, that's where you'll realize the enormous benefits of this exercise. +300 years ago, Galileo got into a spot of trouble. Anybody remember why he got into a spot of trouble? He got into a spot of trouble because he postulated that perhaps the sun does not move around the earth, perhaps the earth moves around the sun. Every single one of you is convinced that Galileo got it wrong. The earth does not move around the sun. The earth revolves around you. Now you're laughing when I'm trying to make a serious point. Not good, Salah. You really do believe the earth revolves around you. Every one of you does. Tell me, is it or is it not a fact that no matter what happens, you very quickly bring it down into what's the impact on me? No matter what happens, you quickly bring it down, what's the impact on me? Your spouse gets a great job offer. You immediately think, what impact is this going to have on our relationship? Your boss leaves the company, and you think, who's the new person going to be and what's my relationship going to be with this new person? Or possibly, am I going to get promoted, or is it that turkey down the hall? Dr. Rao had a heart attack. This talk is canceled. Great, I can catch up on my email. No matter what happens, you very quickly bring it down to what's the impact on me, even when you're being altruistic. Earthquake in Mexico, oh my God, so many people are dying, let me contribute. And you call up the toll-free number, and very soon you're going, how dare they put me on hold for so long? No matter what happens, you very, very quickly bring it down to what's the impact on me. True, false? Did I get it right, folks? We all live in a me-centered universe. And here is what you have to know about living in a me-centered universe. If that is where you spend the majority of your time, you are going to live a mediocre existence punctuated with flashes of pleasure, but essentially meaningless. It comes with the territory. Ancient England, site of a great cathedral being built. And the architect was going to the scene of the construction, and he came across three people, all of whom were doing the same thing. There was a big block of stone, and they took a smaller block of stone, put it on the big block of stone, and beat it with a hammer till it broke. And he asked the first guy, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Can't you see? I'm breaking rocks." "Why are you breaking rocks?" "Because I get paid a half a day." And the second person said, "I'm helping build the wall behind me." And the third person said, "I'm helping build a giant cathedral, and when it is over, people are going to come from all over the world, and they will feel inspired, and I will have had a small role to play in that." And the third person was the only one who recognized the architect, and he said, "Truth be told, I don't like doing this. This is back-breaking labor, and I can get better wages for less effort. I'm only doing it because I want to learn. Will you teach me to build a cathedral?" And 20 years from that day, the guy who was breaking rocks starved. He no longer had the strength to swing a hammer, and he died. The guy who was helping build the wall behind him was living a life of desperate poverty. And the guy who was helping build a cathedral was on his way to building his first cathedral. That is a choice that every one of you has. Every day when you get up in the morning, you can break rocks, or you can help build a cathedral. I cannot define for you the cathedral that you are building. You're the only person who can do that. But unless you find and define for yourself the cathedral that you're building and anchor yourself in that, you're essentially going to live a meaningless life, punctuated with flashes of pleasure, but you're certainly not going to get to that exalted feeling of joy that I talked about earlier. I remember I was speaking to the top executives of a Fortune 50 firm. There must have been about 60 people in the room. Each one of them ran a country, and many of them ran several countries. And a major new product that the company had introduced had not quite failed, but sales were not up to expectations. And there was a reorganization going on, as a result of which some of the people in that room were not going to be in the room the next year, and they didn't know which ones were not going to be in that. So typical big company scenario, undercurrent of tension always. So I asked them, spend 2 minutes thinking about, why do you get up in the morning and come to work? And they came up with answers. They came up with answers like, this new product has not yet been introduced in my country, and I have to make sure that sales in my region are greater than national averages. Or we just made an acquisition, and I have to make sure that the integration of the acquisition goes smoothly. Things like that. And I told them, if that's why you get up in the morning and come to work, you're either burnt out or you're heading towards burnout. Now, here is this girl, really beautiful, went through the windshield in a car accident, and it is the sutures that you make that give her her looks back. Here is this man, relatively young, early 50s, had a heart attack, and it is the stent that you manufacture that give him his health back. Go talk to the man in the hospital. Go meet the girl and her family. See how important they are in the ecology of their small family social circle. That is why you get up in the morning and come to work. And if that is why you get up in the morning and come to work, all the problems you're facing are minor bumps in the road. But if that is not why you get up in the morning and come to work, any of them can be a major derailment. What I was surprised at is how many people came up to me afterwards to say, "Thank you, Dr. Rao, we needed to hear that. It's so easy to forget." if you define what you do in functional terms. I prepare pro forma balance sheets and income statements and reconcile them. I create marketing strategies for our new product. If you define what you're doing in functional terms, you are breaking rocks. You are fortunate in the sense that many of you are dentists or in the dental profession as hygienists or so on. So by virtue of the work you do, you're automatically healing suffering and promoting well-being. That simply comes as part and parcel. That's an added advantage you have. So you have to define for yourself what is the cathedral that you are building. And you have to anchor yourself in that. You have to find a cause which is bigger than you, a cause which brings a greater good to a greater community. And as I pointed out, you have an inbuilt advantage just by the nature of the work that you do. But unless you do that, you're going to live an essentially mediocre existence. This is one of the most powerful lessons I'm going to teach you today. And I've had many, many occasions where somebody's taken my course when I was teaching at Columbia or London Business School. That's 2.5, 3 decades ago. And I met them there and they say, Professor Rao, this thing that you taught me, has stood me so well. It's something that I use every day. It comes from an old Sufi tale. So let me tell the tale to you. There was a man and his son, and they lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy. They were also dirt poor. And the man got sick and tired of being dirt poor, and he decided he was going to become a rich man. And the way he was going to do that is by breeding and selling horses. So he bought a stallion. Did not have enough money to buy a stallion. He borrowed very heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got the stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And the neighbors came around and said, you were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away. And you still owe us money. You are screwed. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses, and they were close to where the man lived, so he was able to entice them into his paddock, which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. So all of a sudden, he had his stallion back, plus a dozen wild horses. And by the standards of that village, that made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors came around and said, we thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg. And it broke. And it healed crooked. And the neighbors came around and said, he was such a fine young lad, and now he'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How sad. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man, that summer, the king of the country declared war on a neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a crooked leg. And the neighbors had tears in their eyes as they wrote, oh, we don't know if we'll ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son with you. How lucky you are. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. Now I invite you to look back on your life, and can you recollect something that happened that at the time it happened, you thought, this is terrible. But today you can look back at the same thing and say, that wasn't so terrible, or even that was a good thing. Can you recollect any such thing? I see a number of heads nodding, so a number of you can. I remember there was one time when I was hired at a very good speaking fee for a large company. This is one of the largest financial institutions in the world, and the executive who hired me really wanted to get my message over to the entire company. And about 3 weeks before my engagement, he called me up and said, "Dr. Rao, I'm very sorry, but the company's canceled the entire meeting." Okay, bad thing. 2 weeks after that, he called me again and said, "Professor Rao, I really want to get your message out to the company, and there are these 2 smaller meetings that have already been funded, and one is for the East Coast and one is for the West Coast. So basically, we're going to cover the entire company in these 2 meetings. Would you be able to speak at both of them?" So I got 2 speaking engagements at a high fee rather than 1. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? So if you can recollect something that happened in your life, that at the time it happened, you thought this is terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say, wasn't so terrible after all, or maybe even it was a good thing, then why are you in a hurry to label anything that happens to you now bad? Here's something I want you to think about. Whenever an event happens, any event, it does not cause suffering. Let's say you get fired. You now have plenty of spare time. But you get fired and you go, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to me? How am I going to meet my mortgage payments? This is terrible." And the moment you say this is terrible, at that instant suffering begins. Suffering does not begin when the event occurs. Suffering does not begin when you get fired. Suffering begins the instant you decide, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Right? Everybody, you with me? No matter what the event is, it doesn't cause suffering. Suffering begins the instant you decide, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. So what happens if you never label it, this is bad? Remember, something happened to you in the past. At the time that it happened, you thought it was bad, but now you can look back and say, hey, it wasn't so bad after all, or maybe even if it's good. So what you're today about to label bad, if you think, is it possible? Is it remotely possible? Is there any way that this could possibly turn out to be a good thing? Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotional domain. Just asking yourself the question, is there any possible way in which this could actually turn out to be a good thing? And if you then ask yourself the next question, what can I proactively do to make it a good thing? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. This is how you become not just resilient, but develop extreme resilience. Resilience is your ability to bounce back from adversity. In extreme resilience, you bounce back so quickly that someone external might not even know that you have suffered an adverse event. This is a practice. Somebody gives you something and you say, oh, this is bad news. But you can think about, is there any possible way in which this could possibly be a good thing? And then what can I proactively do in order to make it a good thing. And if you inculcate that as a practice, so it becomes second nature, nothing will ever faze you, nothing will ever get you down. Here is how most of us live our life. We set a goal for ourselves. We try very hard to meet the goal. We succeed. Life's a blast. We set a goal for ourselves. We try very hard to meet the goal. We fail. Life sucks. We live our life oscillating between elation and despair, and we spend too much time at the despair end of the spectrum. It is a lousy way to live. There is a better method. Set a goal for yourself. Set an ambitious goal for yourself. Set a stretch goal to yourself. But once you've set the goal for yourself, forget about the goal. Let me repeat that. Forget about the goal. Instead, pour all of your energy into what are the actions that I should take, what are the things that I should do in order to achieve my goal. And you forget about the goal. Invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. Because the outcome, the destination, is a mirage. You go there, you tarry a few minutes, and you're off someplace else. When you're very busy obsessing about the destination, you miss the journey. And the journey is the only thing you have. The journey is with you always. The destination is an outcome. And remember what I talked about earlier in my presentation, you do not have control. You never had control. You never will have control. So whether or not you reach the outcome that you set out to reach is not under your control. You think it is under your control because you have the illusion of control. So you try your level best to do that. Yeah, wonderful, you do the level best. But you honestly don't have control. I remember there was somebody who joined an insurance company, and in his very early days, he had a very good prospect, and he was going to buy a $10 million policies, which is a lot of premium, and he was going to get a very healthy commission. He worked very hard, got it right up to the stage, had the medical exam, and took the guy policy for the application for the guy to sign. And the guy said, I changed my mind. My brother-in-law is in the business, and I never knew he was in the business, and he said he's going to get it for me cheaper. So, sorry, kid, you went to a lot of trouble. Thank you. Stuff like that happens all the time. You do not have control. Now, here's the mistake that we all make. We think the benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is achieving the goal. Wrong. The benefit of setting a goal and trying your level best to achieve the goal is the learning and growth that happen in you and to you as you try your level best to achieve the goal. If you actually achieve the goal, that is a bonus. Be grateful, be immensely grateful. If you don't achieve the goal, the learning and growth have already happened, so you're ahead of the game. It's a no-lose proposition. You know, people talk about, I want to climb Mount Everest. How much time do you spend on top of Mount Everest? A few minutes to a half hour most. You get up there, your buddy takes a picture of you, your buddy gets up there, you take a picture of him, and then you're on your way down and you hope you don't get killed in an avalanche. So if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you better enjoy the weeks and months of acclimatization at Base Camp 1, Base Camp 2, and all the rest of that, right? Works the same way in life. The destination, the outcome is a mirage. The journey is the only thing you have. Invest in the process, and as you invest in the process, you find that it gives you meaning and purpose. The purpose of washing dishes is not to get them clean. This is really profound. It's a Zen saying. But think about it. The purpose of washing dishes is not to get them clean. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes. The byproduct is that they do become clean. But as far as you're concerned, you invest yourself in washing the dishes. Feel the hot water on your hands or your gloves. Feel the detergent to the surface of the vessels. Go through, wash the dishes. But always remember that, and this really is a profound saying. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes. It's not the purpose of washing dishes is to get them clean. Invest in the process. How many basketball fans here? Any basketball fans? Have you heard of John Wooden? John Wooden is supposed to be not just one of the greatest basketball coaches, but one of the greatest coaches of any sport of all time. He was the first person to reach the Basketball Hall of Fame both as a player and as a coach. And he led UCLA to an unprecedented number of victories in the final, and their unprecedented number of appearances in the final. And he discovered, phenomenal players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and so on. And he used to say, every time I worked with a new team, I never talked about winning or outscoring opponents. I always talked about when it is over and you looked in the mirror, did you do the best you were capable of? If you did the best you were capable of, the score really doesn't matter. But if you did the best you were capable of, I fancy you'll find the score to your liking. It's a perfect example of invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. The outcome is beyond your control. You never had control, never will have control, and do not have control now. Remember that. So invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. Einstein said the most important question you will ever ask yourself is the universe friendly? Now, we revere Einstein as a great scientist because he formulated the theory of relativity. He discovered the photoelectric effect, which is why he won the Nobel Prize, by the way. He won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, not for the theory of relativity. But Einstein was also a philosopher, and he had a pretty deep understanding of the way the universe worked. And what he said is the most important. Did the microphone just die on me? Einstein said the most important question you are ever going to ask yourself is the universe friendly? Now think about it. There are people who believe that the universe is unfriendly and the sole purpose of the universe is to frustrate me. So when I am going for an important meeting, the universe will know that and will arrange for me to get stuck in a traffic jam and for my heating system to break down. They're few in numbers. I'm sure there's nobody in this room who's like that. The vast overwhelming majority of us believe that the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly. It's not aware that we exist and couldn't care less. So here I am going around doing my thing, and there's the universe going around doing its thing. Sometimes it seems to be working for me, sometimes it seems to be working against me, but essentially it's a random process. And in reality, the universe neither knows I exist nor cares. And that's the world the vast majority of us live in. What if the universe was aware that you exist? What if the universe was not only aware that you exist, but it was also well disposed towards you? The universe was your friend. Now, friends don't shaft friends, do they? Of course not. So if the universe was my friend, why does the universe give me stuff I don't want? I want to go to travel on vacations, and the universe gives me pandemics and lockdown. Why does that happen? Well, what if the universe gave you not what you wanted, but exactly what you needed for your learning and growth? It's like you were a small child and you want a tub of ice cream, and the universe, through your parents, gives you fruits and vegetables. And you don't want fruits and vegetables. You want a tub of ice cream, but the universe gives you fruits and vegetables. And it isn't until you reach a much higher level of understanding and maturity that you can say, thank God I got fruits and vegetables. What if the universe was like that? It doesn't necessarily give you what you want, but it gives you precisely what you need for your learning and growth. Can you instantly see that regardless of whether or not the universe was friendly, if you believed the universe was friendly, your experience of life would improve dramatically? Yes, no? And what if the universe actually was friendly? When you live in a friendly universe is where you begin to be able to experience the joy that I spoke about earlier in my talk. When this friendly universe whose bosom you're lying on is taking care of your every need, when there is music in your life, when you're floating, gently bumping on ground every couple of 100 feet or not and going on. That only happens when you're in the bosom of a friendly universe. Now, understand the friendly universe is a mental model, and just because you recognize that a mental model is superior doesn't mean you can adopt it. It means you have to work to adopt it. So how do you start living in a friendly universe? Keep a journal for yourself. And in that journal, you put down, take careful note of the ways in which the universe is working with you and for you. And when you do that, you'll find there are so many. Have you ever had a situation where you thought about a friend you haven't been in touch with and said, "Jay, I've got to get back in touch," and later that week there's a phone call or an email from that person? There is a song that's playing in your head and you can't quite place it, and you turn on the radio and that song is playing. Have things like that ever happened to you? Sure. And what do? Oh, that's a coincidence, and you brush it aside. That coincidence is a miracle killer. Start looking at the number of ways in which the universe is working to your benefit. And as you start noting it, as you start appreciating it, you'll find the number of such instances increases. And if you made a note of all of that and you look through that, there will come a point when you wonder, am I making all of this up, or am I really living in a friendly universe? And that's the time you work harder, and when you do, you'll tip over. You'll tip over into a world where the universe is your friend and looking after you. And your experience of life transforms right there. Here's another concept that comes, and this one comes from the Native American tradition. There was a young man who was growing up, and he was going to take his place with the adults of the tribe, and the final rite of passage was a conversation with the medicine man. And the medicine man told him, here is this dog, kind, intelligent, loving, trustworthy. And here is this wolf, malevolent, vicious, ready to strike at and kill anything or anybody. And the dog and the wolf are fighting. And the dog and the wolf are both inside you. And the young lad asks, which one's going to win? And the medicine man says, whichever one you feed. Now think about it. Inside each one of you are altruistic, let's help each other and make the world better impulses. And inside each one of you are, let me grab everything I can for myself and the devil take the hindmost impulses. And the two are always at war. It is your job to identify and selectively feed the dog in you. It's also your job to identify the dog in everybody you run across and feed that dog. And when the dog in you becomes friends with the dog in the other person, magic happens in both your lives. Too often we feed the wolf, both in ourselves and others, and we don't even recognize this is what we're doing. Let's say you're having a bad day at work and you go to the coffee machine and a colleague comes up and says, I'm having a bad day at work. And you say, you're having a bad day at work? Let me tell you about my bad day at work. And your bad day at work tops his bad day at work and you go off feeling smug. You just fed the wolf, both in yourself and the other person. And you don't even recognize you did that. If instead you'd gone, yeah, you're having a bad day at work, I'm having a bad day at work. What is it that we can collectively do to make sure that nobody has such a bad day at work? And now you've started feeding the dog. Think about this. In every conversation you have, every interaction you have with everybody, with your spouse, with your children, with your colleagues, with the Uber driver who takes you to the airport, am I talking, behaving in a manner that leaves this person feeling better about himself, the state of the world, or am I talking, behaving, acting in a manner that takes him on a downward spiral? Am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? And you can do that in every conversation you have. When you're fighting with your spouse, am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? Just asking yourself that question sincerely will change your life. Be like a civil engineer. Now, you're a civil engineer, and I call you to my office. I'm a county executive, and I want a road built. And I want a road built from here to there. And in the place where the road needs to be built, there is a forest, a mountain, and a swamp. Do you get angry at the forest, the mountain, and the swamp? Of course not. They're the terrain you've been given, and your skill as a civil engineer determines how the road's going to get built. Are you going to go over the obstacles, under the obstacles, through the obstacles, or around the obstacles? Right? Your skill as a civil engineer determines how the road gets built. And if it turns out that the mountain is of granite and the forest is hardwood and the swamp is really deep, you might think in terms of raising your fees, but apart from that, it has no impact on your thinking. Is that right? Because it is your skill as a civil engineer to deal with the terrain in which you've been given. You don't get angry at the forest, the mountain, and the swamp. In exactly the same way, you are the civil engineer of your life. You have to build the road to your meaningful, purposeful existence where there is joy oozing out of you at every point. And all of the problems and the problem people in your life are the mountains, the swamp, and the forest. You don't get angry at them. You just figure out how you're going to get the road built. They are the terrain with which you are functioning. So every time you're in a situation in your life where you're losing control of your emotions, just ask yourself, am I being a civil engineer? So be a civil engineer. We're going to end with this short film.
All the animals in the forest come up and they are transfixed as they watch the forest running and they feel really overwhelmed. This little hummingbird, it says, I'm going to do something to hummingbird. So the entries to 6 and drop of water. He puts it on the pipe and goes up and down, up and down, up and down, as fast as it can. In the meantime, all the other animals, much bigger animals, like the elephant with a big trunk, could bring much more water. They are standing there helpless, and they are saying to the hummingbird, what do you think you can do? You're too little. This fire is so big. Your wings are too little. And your beak so small. You can only bring a small drop of water at a time. But as they continue to discharge it, it turns to them without wasting any time and tells them, I'm doing the best I can. And that to me is what all of us should do. We should always feel like a hummingbird. I may feel insignificant, but I certainly don't want to be like the animals watching as the planet goes down the drain. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can.
And that is a motto for life. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can. Thank you.